be doing this. And you probably all got the little got it button that we have to hit. And so why are we doing this today? And so this presentation came about after hearing concerns from youth, parents, and teachers regarding how to navigate online space safely and supported. So there seemed to be a lack of informed and consistent strategies to address this concern. So a working committee was developed, which includes Andrea Dick, the Mental Health Capacity Building Program Manager with the Battle River School Division, Lori Jensen, Program Manager for the Family Resource Network, Constable Danton Bentfield with the Camrose Police Services, the School Resource Officer, the family wellness worker, Lori Kushinarik with Elk Island Catholic Schools, Tracy Burnett, the sexual health nurse with Alberta Health Services. We have Shara Harkey with the Association of Communities Against Abuse, myself. We have Jenny Offram, who is going to be our presenter today, who I will introduce to you all in a moment. And also, I'd like to also acknowledge some of the staff out in the Flagstaff region, Lynn, who also joined and has some staff with her as well. So given the number of attendees that we have today, I would like you to introduce yourself by using the chat box. So if you could kindly share your name and your agency, and then we have a sense of who we are all gathered with today. If you have any questions for Jenny or anyone on our working committee, please do type those in the chat box, and we are going to be monitoring the chat box. We hope to have 20 minutes left at the end of our presentation to answer those questions. So Jenny will, present for about an hour. She won't stop and answer questions then, but she will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. So it is my absolute privilege, everyone, to introduce you to our presenter, Jenny Offram, who's the program manager for the Association for Communities Against Abuse. Jenny's experience and wisdom in her role with ACAA has really helped our committee begin to develop and really navigate a strategic plan to help support youth, families, and professionals in our community. So I will turn it over to Jenny, and we can sit back and learn from her.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Welcome everybody. Sorry, I'm sort of juggling host and introducing myself at the moment just because of some technical things here. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. It's just amazing to see how many people are really interested in this topic. I just wanted to share before we get started that if this brings up any surprising feelings, thoughts, or questions, you're welcome to please take a photo of this slide and or look at the QR code. That's a way to get access 24/7 to specialized supports. Make sure So who we are, Tammy's already introduced us. Thank you so much for doing that. So we are a group of agencies who believe that working together works better than working apart. And we are really seeing this as a need in our community. But that being said, what I say here may not be representative of each agency. We all approach this issue with different perspectives, which is what brings extra value. And I do invite you to join us in offering different perspectives just based on what comes up for you from today. So spoiler alert, we're all still learning about this. None of us are true experts in this. And we really would love for you to join us. So a little bit about myself. My name is Jenny Offram. I'm program manager at ACAA. I've been working in the field of sexualized violence for 17 years now. I've worked as a therapist, supported people through the criminal justice system, done education like this, worked as a manager, evaluation, in a few different areas, mostly in Calgary, but I'm really, really pleased to be calling Camrose home now and serving East Central Alberta. So today we are going to hopefully be providing you a little bit more information to help you describe the importance of ongoing conversations about digital and online spaces. Hopefully, by the end of today, you'll be able to explain 2 key messages about navigating digital and online spaces and interaction with youth, and identify at least 2 resources if you need any help, because at the end of the day, we probably all need a little bit of help with this. If by the end of today, these goals are not achieved, that's on me. So please keep asking questions if we're not getting to this point. And for some of you, this might not be new information. We all engage with this information material a little bit differently at different points in our lives though. So don't be surprised if maybe you have a couple aha moments, even if none of this is new, just based on where you're at this point. What we will be doing today is exploring what we know about kids and their ways of using the internet to open up conversations about navigating online spaces and reaching out for help at a very high level. We're here for 90 minutes, if that, and I'd love to dig into things a little bit deeper, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that today. However, we do have a series of additional education workshops that you can always reach out to us, so that we might be offering in other lunch and learns. I just want to make sure nobody else is. Okay, it looks like everybody's in, sorry. So just to get a kind of a sense of where you are at with all of this, we're going to do a poll, or 3 polls actually. So I'm going to launch 3 questions, and this is anonymous. It's a Likert scale. Nobody's going to know how you answer. So let's just see how this works. So number 1, are you guys getting this? Is this working? Yeah, okay. Number 1, you are confident in knowing when and how to start conversations with youth about internet exploitation. You can answer not 1 bit, a little, usually, or I've got this figured out. And again, this is anonymous. So we'll give you about a minute to do that. The second question is, you feel like you have a good grip on the risks and benefits of connecting online. And the third is, you would feel confident in reaching out to ACAA or another organization for further support. So this is just a temperature gauge to see where everybody is at. We might see a difference at the end, we might not. This is great. So thank you so much for those who did complete this. Most of you did. That's great. We love participation. With this Lunch and Learn, there's not a ton of opportunities for participation, but just because we want to get through a lot of material. But thank you very much for doing it when we do give the opportunity. So I'm going to end this poll in 3, 2, 1. And share the results. So what we're seeing is there's kind of a middle ground in terms of being able to, or feeling confident in starting conversations. I have no doubt you all can do this. It's the confidence that matters. You feel like you have a good grip on the risks and benefits. Great. And you could, many of you, almost 50%, would feel really confident in reaching out. So that's excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Is it closed for you too? Great. So we'll move through those. Thank you for doing that. So we're just going to do a little bit of what we call a Zoom boom. I don't know if everyone's ever heard of a Zoom boom before, but just to get people participating in a really light and easy way, I want you to think about when you were first, I'm guessing you've all had a life before internet, or most of you anyways, some of you. But when you were first introduced to the World Wide Web, what was the first thing you wanted to explore? So a Zoom boom is when we count down from 3 and everybody posts in chat the answer to this question for themselves. So just give yourself a moment And we'll go 3, 2, 1. This will be fun. Family history. Email. Oh, I know. Okay, wasn't it like wild? Like even just trying to understand what this was. Weather. You didn't have to call the weather line anymore. Oh, this is good. Thank you. I remember going to my librarian. I was in high school and going to the librarian and asking for a phone book for like web pages. Like, how do we know how to get to web pages? This may have been prior to Google, or at least mainstream Google. So that tells you how old I am. But thanks, everyone. That was great. Okay, we've got another Zoom boom coming up. So this is, we're going to move into a little bit of content here. So I just want you to, on the count of 3, let me know, how are kids different from adults? Don't think too hard on this. How are kids different from adults? So 3, 2, 1. Oh, this is good. Brains, trusting, yes, the way we think. Good. So Shara is going to, so I didn't introduce Shara. Shara is the education coordinator at ACAA. And today she is helping me out a lot with trying to keep things managed. So she's going to go through and just provide a bit of a summary of what you're writing down.
Brains are different. They're dependent on others. A few different, that's a good theme: brain development, maturity, fearless, trusting, the way they think. Kids grew up with technology in their lives, maybe unlike some of the other generations. Priorities, don't see that far into the future. Impulsive.
Beautiful.
So fewer experiences.
Thank you. Okay, well, based on that, you've already got this. So I can whip through this material and yeah, this is great. Some things we know about kids. Kids are still growing. They're malleable, they're dependent, and they absolutely crave connection. And most importantly, like many of you have mentioned, their experience and perspective is proportionate to their development. Littler, shorter lives means they haven't been able to develop the context yet for what they are experiencing, what they are seeing, and what they are learning. Another really big difference is the fact that the internet now exists. There's a huge disconnect between how kids use technology and how we used it, depending on your generation. This has also resulted in a massive shift in culture. So, you can just see by this chart that it took many, many, many years for the radio to hit mainstream, for people to actually have access. It took how many? Like 34 days for the same number of people to be able to access Angry Birds. So this just shows you how quickly things are changing now as opposed to 50 years ago. No wonder our heads are spinning. Okay, one more Zoom boom. Well, not one more, another Zoom boom. What freaks us out about kids and the internet? 3, 2, 1.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to do a little summary here. Predators, exploitation, vulnerability, safety, the permanence of the internet, security, anything can be found, privacy.
Mm-hmm.
So inability to communicate in person. We don't communicate in the same way. There's a lack of secrecy. There's a lack of security.
Okay, thank you. So that's it. Anything can be found. There's a lack of control over what kids and youth are exposed to. There might be others out there with harmful intentions, with wide-ranging and long-term consequences. There are a lot of things that freak us out, but what hasn't changed is that kids are still really curious. They're really interested in learning. They're dependent on adults. They crave that connection. They yearn for it. They're seeking fun and they're really playful. So it's not like kids are that different than, than we were when we were little. All of these experiences can be found online. So the motives for using the internet are largely benign and feed very normal parts of a child's needs. And because kids are still growing, they're malleable and dependent. And if you think about it, these beautiful parts of what makes kids kids also makes them more easily exploited by people online. So these very normal parts of development are exactly those that people who want to cause harm or choose to cause harm exploit. Their need for belonging and acceptance is developmentally hardwired, and it heightens their desire to please others. This is something that is truly innate for children. In fact, it's innate for all of us, but even more so for children because they're dependent. They have limited perception of privacy and anonymity. It's the sense that bad stuff happens somewhere else, and I trust everybody I know. Their world is really small, so it still feels small when they're connecting with people online. And as many of you mentioned, their prefrontal cortex is still developing, and they're still learning about short and long-term implications of actions. In fact, some of us still are as well. And like I said, all of these very normal parts of child development make kids vulnerable to content, marketing, violence, pornography, hate, racism, misogyny. Contact, so this is who they're in contact with, how they make contact, accepting friends, followers, disclosing personal information, luring, harassment, ideological persuasion, and conduct. And this is how youth participate either as someone causing harm or being victimized by harm, like cyberbullying, sexual harassment, could be sexting, gambling, how we, any of us, act online. And if a child is faced with any of these harms, what are some things we want them to know and feel? We want them to know and feel that they are not bad kids, because what's going on is so developmentally normal. It's just within the context of the internet. And that if someone chose to hurt them, it is not their fault. And that they can reach out for help. And most importantly, that something can be done. These are messages we can give kids before and during and after they even touch an iPad. It is never too early to start giving this information to children. And it is never too late. Just a shameless plug for a presentation ACAA has about how to engage children in these ideas of consent from the time they're born. And so in this presentation, we really focus on the little ones. But after after presenting this once, a mother came up to me and said, I feel like it's too late. My kid is 10, they're going to camp for the first time. And I'm really, really nervous because I've never had these conversations. So that was a good reminder to me to always let you know that it is also never too late to start talking with kids about how we all navigate the internet and all the sticky areas. Having conversations with children early and often is one of the most powerful actions grown-up allies can take to help strengthen children's savviness in navigating digital spaces and interactions. This is to reinforce that the children that they don't have to handle this stuff on their own. It's not their job to keep themselves safe. When a child thinks it's their job, they think they're to blame and they might hold it in a little bit more. If someone hurts them, it is not their fault, and that we have their back. According to a Thorn survey, and Thorn is actually a resource that I'm going to mention a number of times, and Cher's going to post this link, and I really encourage you to go through their website. It's excellent. But according to a Thorn survey, the window to talk to kids about these issues shrinks as time goes on. So 40% of age 9 to 12-year-olds turned to offline support like a grown-up, like a parent or a caregiver or somebody else when they encountered potentially harmed themes or experiences online. But that number drops by half when they get to the age of 13 to 17. So the earlier we can engage kids in these conversations and let them know that they can keep talking to us and how to talk to us, the better. So we're going to talk a bit about how to build a child safety net now. So we're really working on empowering children to build skills. So if you think about it, we wouldn't let a kid drive a car without lessons, practicing, learning defensive driving first. When a kid makes a mistake driving a car, we teach them a better way to do it. We don't just take it away and say you're never driving again. We don't ban them from learning. When a kid makes a mistake on the internet, same thing. This is an opportunity to figure out how to do it differently. So first of all, we want to reflect on our own comfort level and our own values and our own strengths around consent, sex, technology, and our comfort level with not having all the answers. And just to let you know, you don't need to talk about sex or sexual abuse or sexual harassment with a child until they're ready. So just because we're not talking about them doesn't mean we don't reflect on what are our own values, what are our own hangups, where do we get scared? And that reflection can be a really powerful part of this journey. We want to ground conversations, values, and expectations in the context of consent, because consent is beyond sexual relationships. It actually applies to all areas of how we interact with other people. But with little ones, we talk about body bubbles, private parts, spidey senses, boundaries, sneaky stuff. As they get older, we start using different language, but it's still the same concepts. And without having healthy and ongoing conversation and communication about consent and all of these other topics like empathy from a young age, it's much harder to have the necessary conversations about what kids can be exposed to online when the time comes to talk about the really hard stuff. We also want to establish family and organizational norms. This includes screen time, privacy, and transparency. And even though kids push back against boundaries, they always do. That's normal. We expect that. It's okay for them to do that. Around transparency and privacy, it's really important to let kids know exactly where their private space is on the internet, if they even have any. At any age, it's okay, or you get to decide what your family values are, what your organizational values are, but let kids know exactly what to expect from you. And sometimes letting kids know that, you don't have privacy on the internet. I am going to be checking in one way or another, actually gives them an out when their friends are trying to expose them or get them to look at something they know that they shouldn't. So this can actually be a safeguard and kind of like my folks are watching this, my parents are going to be looking at this, we can't do that on my phone. And to role model these. So when we share images of others, including children, without practicing consent and really verbalizing this for them, it gives license to the children and youth watching us to do the same and to expect the same from others. So when we're able to model that becomes almost a neurological expectation. This is habit. This is how it should be. And then when somebody shares a photo of them without their consent, that should feel weird because that's not the norm. So these are really great ways to, in your home and in your organization, let kids know exactly what their rights are with regard to their photos online or any personal information. And going to the experts, which in this case really are the kids. It's talking to kids about what their favorite app is, how does it work, what do you love about it, and really engaging in these conversations. And also talking about the good and the bad of what happens online. Gives you a sense of what their scope of the issue is. Sometimes we don't know how to talk about this stuff or kind of how deep to go until they start feeding us their point of view. And that's what we're going to use to lead the conversations. Now, today we're not getting into app reviews, which apps are great, what are the privacy concerns, but Shara's going to post in chat some places where you can find these reviews. This is what I find very daunting about youth and the internet. It's impossible to learn everything there is to know about every new app kids are using. But ironically, and luckily, we have the internet to guide us. Please do that. Please seek out adult-sourced resources to give you more insight on what youth in your life are actually using. And familiarize yourself with platform-specific settings. Again, Cher is going to share a few different resources for this, but same idea. There are so many to go through and to understand. So this is not something we're going to spend time on, but there is a lot of information out there. The other idea is to co-create a digital space together. Oftentimes we kind of think, okay, the internet is their thing, but when at an early age, we can really build social media accounts together. It helps kids to, again, it's that role modeling. It's the co-creation of how we are together in a digital space. What does this actually look like? We're not going to, we've developed a framework to help anyone with kids in their lives to get support and when to start talking about key issues, how to do this, additional resources for support, all based on developmental milestones. But today we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but if you or your organization would like to learn more about this framework based on the age you're working with, please let us know. I'll give you a little, some little bits and pieces, but to go into it, you know, some of you are working with little ones, some of you are working with teenagers, but a little sampling is like for, you know, age around 4 to 6, when you start to see that the child is asking to use a shared device, if they're asking for a password to the device, these are all kind of things that might happen around that age. They are really good cues to start having these conversations. So can you show me the game you're playing? What do you like about it? Have you ever seen anything that maybe you thought was for adults and not for kids? And how did you know? These are really low stakes way to start conversations about online anything. And then we also provide some resources to help build the conversation, some supplemental information. Another example is around age 10 to 12, sometimes even earlier, but the youth might start showing signs of or interest in social media, or they talk about talking to their friends online, or they might mention an experience with somebody they didn't know online. These are times when you might want to ask things like, so, you know, if any of your friends message people they don't know in real life. And it's at any of these ages, it's actually really helpful to externalize it. So instead of saying, do you message anybody you don't know? It's, have you ever, do any of your friends? It's that kind of like, oh, I'm asking for a friend mentality. Let them talk about what other people are doing to help them, because what they're doing there is testing the waters. If you freak out, if you become quite agitated when you hear that their friend is talking to somebody online, it kind of lets them know how you might respond if they're talking to somebody online. So just keep that in mind, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But I just wanted to introduce you to this framework that we have started developing. We're still considering ways to get this out there, whether it be kind of a toolkit or cue cards, but we're hoping that we're not sure where it's going to go. Again, resources for this age. Cher's going to post some things around really supporting, to support you in talking to youth about some really tough stuff. You might think that talking to youth about seeing pornography, about grooming, might actually make you feel a little bit sick to talk to a 10 to 12-year-olds about this. I know it's a bit of a shocker for me to think about. This is why I turned to my friend Tracy Burnett, ask her exactly what she would do, because locally, she's the one I would definitely turn to for this type of information. Or you could go online and get some hints there. But we know that having these conversations over time gets rid of that big, awkward talk. I'm sure some of you remember that from your teenhood or your childhood. Gives kids the right information at the right time and builds a foundation of trust. Because building that foundation of trust where a child feels unconditionally supported all of the time can build the safety net kids need to be able to come to you when something scary happens. And as caregivers and adult allies, we must be working every day to ensure that young people feel safe enough to come to us, even if a decision they made goes sideways. And Not starting these conversations does not protect them from a harm. It leaves them ill-equipped to handle it when it does happen. So when we think, oh, fingers crossed, it's not going to happen, all that does is leave them with no tools and no one to turn to. So we really advocate for these conversations to happen. But here's the thing, and I need you to remember this because this is what keeps me sane through all of this, because I do find it overwhelming. This is not about the internet. This is about how we engage with kids. But when it comes to traversing the online landscape, kids need to be equipped with the information, skills, and support to navigate the stormy seas. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the key online safety risks. And this is not I really don't want to be fear-mongering here, but I want to let you know what's out there, just a little bit. And first of all, to be clear, if someone has been sexually violated in any way, it is never their fault. So I think a lot of us, when we hear about somebody sharing photos and them being shared with somebody else non-consensually, our initial reaction is, why did you share those photos? Why did you even take those photos? You should have known that would happen. But that really normal knee-jerk reaction very easily shuts that conversation and causes a lot of shame for the person who did. So we always need to remember that if someone shared someone else's photo without consent, that is not the fault of the person who was violated. That is the fault of the person who shared it non-consensually. So leading us into key online safety risks, it was actually a little, I never know whether to put sexting as a risk or not because of what I just said. So, so we could do a whole half-day session on sexting and still not cover everything. But at the end of the day, sexting is sending intimate or nude photos, and it is increasingly common among youth. Most don't see it as fundamentally bad or harmful, but the harm typically arises when someone shares or shows the photo without consent. So sexting actually between youth is actually legal when it is just shared between two consenting youth. They've both really agreed this is okay, and it's not shared beyond that. And even when the relationship changes, those photos are gone. They're deleted. They're no longer sort of in use. That is the only time it is consensual or legal among youth. And that's similar to laws around age of consent with physical intimacy as well. So how do we talk about this with kids? Because most of us didn't grow up in this type of environment. Things that we end up, well, we're not spending a ton of time on this, but just a little tidbit is so have you ever heard of people sharing intimate photos that are really private with somebody else? Why do you think they would do that? What do you think is fun about that? Why do you think people might like that? Again, asking, sort of externalizing the questions, but really getting yourself into the most open and non-judgmental frame of mind that you can. And if you can't get there, fake it or wait to have the conversation until you can get there, because any judgment from you around this will shut it down so fast. And I have to say, there's a really good reason we do raise our children in a community and in a village, because we tend to be more open with other people's kids than our own. So this is why it's really nice to have people like Andrea and Lori in the school system who can have these conversations, so that when our child does choose to be honest with us, we can, maybe someone else can be calm with them. So but it's still really important to be as open as possible. But it also helps us to open the door to sharing non-consensually. What if somebody was pressuring you to send a pic? What might that look like? Would you feel comfortable, or what would it take to feel comfortable for somebody to ask to have a photo deleted? So these are all conversations that you can have around sexting. Now, a problem that arises with sharing intimate photos is when teens are coerced into sending photos, or if they're blackmailed into sending photos, and this is called sextortion. So Cher's going to share another really great resource from Thorn on sextortion. And this is basically when somebody says, send me a photo, or I'm going to, you know, tell everybody that you were drunk last weekend, or, you know, they use a piece of information to make them send a photo, or send me a photo and I'll give you $100. So it's a way to, it's an exchange of some service or something or piece of information for a photo. I'm talking about sextortion. Same type of thing though, you can, as with sexting, is really based out of curiosity. Why might someone feel pressured to send a pic? Why might it be hard to send a pic, or hard to say no to sending a pic? And what if someone started threatening you to send one? What would you do? That would feel really scary. So the most important thing here is to validate. Say, yeah, that would be terrifying. I would feel so anxious. And then leading into, what can we do about that? Who could you tell? Again, another day, we'll dive deeper into this. But Cher is gonna share a really great website called Don't Get Sextorted. And the thing is that these conversations, they don't have to be really heavy. I love this because it encourages this idea around, if somebody asks you for a pic and you don't want to send it, send a mole rat. And it's got a whole video on it. It can just help people. When we laugh, when we have a good sense of humor, we're able to think more clearly about things. It doesn't have to be so heavy. Exposure to content we've already talked about, but the reason I added it here again is because at this point, at some point, we do have to talk about pornography with children and exposure to, you know, videos and images online that are not realistic, but really young children are being exposed to pornography. Again, we'll dive in another day, but I would also be talking to Tracy Burnett about this one. I have talked to her about this one, and she's full of really great, insightful information. So I would definitely defer to her locally. Grooming is another, we do have a whole section on grooming if we have time today, but it's this idea that it's a way for people to gain access to a child or to get a child to do things that they otherwise wouldn't feel comfortable doing. It's setting this sort of false sense of safety for a child. And unfortunately, it can look a lot like making a good friend. And so it may not be clear that grooming is happening for a really long time, sometimes until after the fact, or until years later when it's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that was abuse or that was harmful, because grooming can be so insidious. So again, we will talk a little bit about what that looks like, but just for the sake of time, won't get into that too long right now. Actually, we'll talk about it right now. It's coming up. But this idea with kids around, is it friendship or is it sus? Put up your hand if you know what sus means. It's Andrea does because she works with kids. Stephanie does because she has a teenager. Sus is suspect. So basically, you know, new language, kids. Yeah, lots of people here actually know because they do work with children. But some things, let's take a look. So let's say you're texting somebody online. You're pretty cool. Oh, shucks, DM. So that means like, mind if we take it private? But the thing is, leaving the comment section or a public thread and talking on a private messaging app gives people a chance to learn more about personal information about you, or talk to you knowing they're safe from being overheard from others. So these are all things that we need to talk to kids about, or at least let them know this is a thing. The problem being, how does a child decipher whether it's a friendship or whether it's a suspect? So, you know, we have to give kids a little bit of a break around knowing that, because most of us wouldn't know. Sometimes people who intend to cause harm check for others. So someone might ask if you're alone to send you content they wouldn't want your parents or other people seeing. They might also want you alone to get you to share more pictures or information. If someone you don't know or a child doesn't know is specifically seeking out ways to talk to them in private, it's time to be extra careful. It's okay to end a conversation, block a user. You know, we give kids all these strategies, but we want to let them know what to look out for first. You seem sad today. Want to talk with you? So somebody who is showing care. Normally, what's wrong with that? It's also something that people who are grooming might use. So we all enjoy having somebody offer a listening ear, and it can be really, really helpful. It can feel really good. But it's also a way for people to ask more personal questions, get to know them a little bit better, get to know, you know, things that maybe a child wouldn't otherwise share. Love bombing. Does anyone know what love bombing is? Yeah, some of you. It's basically like blasts of caring in the beginning of a relationship and can make you feel so good. But for somebody on the receiving end of that, it might lead them to feel safe to do things that they might not otherwise do, especially when that love bombing is actually combined with separating them from their caregivers or other people who are caring for them. So it's really what we want kids to be looking out for. And what we want to be looking out for too is when kids start to become isolated from the other people in their lives. And this can be done intentionally over time by people who they meet online. It can also be done in real life as well. But the online stuff can just look a little bit more hidden, especially when they're DMing. Easing into pics. This could be something like, hey, want to send a face pic? I haven't seen you yet. So there are some pics that are harmless to share with somebody that you trust. But the thing is, with kids, with any of us, once we share a photo of someone, you can't control who it's shared with. They can also, of course, you guys know this, communicate more information than we intend to communicate. We can find out where people live with sports jerseys, where they're at on the weekend, how they spend their time. Are they in hockey tournaments every weekend? Are there evenings filled with soccer? There's a lot of information we can find out by what people share and post. Asking for a phone number. So just asking for another way to communicate other than the original platform that you're on. And making fast cash. This might seem obvious to us, but especially in these economic times, I think people are extra vulnerable to this. So anyone offering a way to make fast cash is sus. And of course, this one is a little bit more obvious to us, but may not be so obvious to kids, especially when it's feeling a little bit like you're already in kind of deep. But the non-consensual photo sharing can definitely very easily is illegal for one thing. It's very, very harmful to have a photo shared out of your control. It can also lead to sextortion, which is this, threats and blackmail. We're going to do a Zoom boom here. What stops kids from talking about this with us, with adults who might be able to help? 3, 2, 1.
I'll do a summary for you, Jenny, but fear of getting in trouble, fear that we're going to overreact. Maybe they're afraid of losing their device or access to their technology. They want to maybe handle it on their own. Shame. Maybe they're worried about disappointing us as their caregivers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. And because kids are still growing, they're malleable, and they absolutely crave and depend on connection. They literally can't live without connection to us. And their need for belonging and acceptance is developmentally hardwired. They don't want to disappoint. They don't want to disappoint their parents, other adults in their lives, their friends, or even maybe the stranger on the internet who's harming them. Again, they have a limited perception of privacy and anonymity, and they may not even recognize the significance or harm because they know them, they trust them. It's hard to imagine that somebody who has shown you so much care could harm you. And this relationship feels good. And of course, their prefrontal cortex is still developing. They might prioritize access to their device more than potential help and support, because that access to device is their lifeline to their friends, to, you know, a lot of different experiences that are really important to them. And being able to weigh the pros and cons of reaching out for help versus handling it on their own and maintaining access to their friends is a very difficult decision to make. So some things we know about how kids disclose based on the fact that they're still growing, malleable, and dependent. If the story or their experience is layered with something they don't understand and don't have the words for, or if they have concern that it's going to sever a relationship, telling someone becomes much more complicated. Their dependency on others, especially grown-ups, can impact how they tell. So if kids are impacted or harmed, either online or even offline, they might tell a little bit at a time. They might test your reaction, like, oh, this happened to a friend, or something little happened. I'm just going to see how this person reacts. They might water down details so as not to alarm you. They might use code words or descriptions that fit their worldview, but don't necessarily fit, you know, your language. And their details might be really hard to follow, because we know that during a traumatic experience, our memory, our attention, the logical part of our brain goes offline. Kids might also tell you in a nonchalant way, almost seemingly by accident. When you see what happened to them as a very serious issue, they might not recognize the significance. And all of this might be compounded by trauma, which can affect memory, language, and self-worth. So we can't expect children to just come out and tell us what happened. So what do you think would help a child or youth reach out for help? Let's do a little Zoom boom. What would set the stage? What would foster that for them?
So having a lot of trust, sharing experiences where you maybe didn't do the right thing online, being a caring and safe adult, being open to the conversation, connection, again, openness, validation. These are kind of most of the themes that are coming through here.
Yeah, thank you. So early and ongoing conversations. Oh. Viewing mistakes as reparable. And kids knowing that it's not their fault. And you know what I'm not seeing here? I'm not seeing, this is just something I just noticed, us knowing the internet inside out. We don't need to know everything about the internet in order for kids to feel safe reaching out to us. So I hope that gives you a sense of relief, because it does for me. And if someone does reach out for help, again, this is another session that we do. We take a deep dive into how to help somebody. And going back and a little bit about disclosures as well, because kids don't usually tell us anyways. They're going to tell a friend who tells their parent. So your child or somebody in your life, a child who comes to your agency, might end up telling you that this happened to a friend of theirs, because that's how the story typically goes. But if somebody does reach out to help, we want to know how to respond, how to reach out, how to report if that's what they want to do, and then how to remove these images from online. There's a big difference between being harmed in person and being harmed online. They both can cause a lot of trauma, but that sense of being, the experience of being harmed online is different, because You never know when the images are gone, or if they're gone, or who has seen them. It can feel very ambiguous, almost haunting a person for a very, very long time. So how do we respond? This can be so simple. I'm so glad you told me. What are your biggest concerns right now? And we're going to figure this out together. So respecting their privacy, this is typically not a 911. You can take time to make a game plan. You might be absolutely, panicking inside. If this has never been something you've ever dealt with before, it's very normal to think, oh, like, what do I do now? But really, it's okay to take time. Giving lots of choice and control, even if you feel like you are obligated to tell somebody else, whether it be reporting to the police, children's services, or within your organization. Giving lots of choice and transparency about what your obligations are, and letting the child or youth be part of that decision making. Really important. When anyone is sexually violated online or offline, their entire sense of control is removed. And that's one of the biggest injuries, is I had no control over this. Part of me was taken by somebody else. So to replace that, to give that control back, is part of the healing. Reach out. You need to reach out. And even if you've done this a million times, I really encourage you, as adults, use your ecosystem. Call ACAA, call another sexual assault center, call the people in your life that you trust. Use low impact disclosures though. There's no need for you, unless you're in a reporting space, there's no need to give any identifying information, any details about what happened, but really take care of you. Figure out who you can trust, what you need to get off your chest, what are you feeling about this, and do what you need to do to process it. And report when ready. This is a extremely, and Constable Benefield can speak to this, but it is a very low reported crime. Sexual violence is the lowest of all crimes in terms of reporting. Online sexual violence, we all want to know, what are the numbers? What are the numbers? But we don't know the numbers because it's so rarely reported. But we also know that reporting isn't always the right choice, especially immediately. People really need to know all of the options available to them, and make that choice when they're ready, to know what it's going to look like, be able to have all their questions answered. And luckily, there is a lot of information available about how to report online offenses. CyberTip is a really great resource. Our local police, our CMP as well. And our experience in cameras anyways with the police is they are more than happy to answer questions before an official disclosure is made. And that has been a huge benefit to survivors that we work with, because they get all of their, their nerves get a little bit settled when they can ask a question from big to small. And the police have been extremely responsive, even coming to our office to have these conversations. Again, if this happens, don't comply with threats. And if the person complied with threats, don't ask them why they did that. You might want to know why. You might be really angry that they did that. But, it is what it is. But, once we do know that this has happened, encourage them not to comply with threats, because it won't make things better. And keep correspondence, usernames, images, videos. And that's something police and CyberTip can really help with, figuring out how to do that, how to store that, etc. And there are ways to remove images. So needhelpnow.ca is the place to go to find out exactly how to do that. There have been varying responses from the platform sites. Like if something's on Facebook or on Instagram, sometimes they can be quite responsive in taking it down. And that is mostly when you say, I'm under 18, I did not consent to this image. Even then though, results may vary. So it could take some advocacy by a good grown-up ally who's willing to fight for you. And because kids, thankfully, are still growing, still malleable, independent, and connected, they heal their resilience and capacity to cope is proportionate to the supportive connections with adults in their lives. So after all this information, I hope you're not feeling anxious and downtrodden, because I also want you to know that there is hope, that bad things can happen online, and people can still grow. It doesn't mean that whoever was impacted is a bad kid. Even if it was, related to a decision they made that went sideways, it doesn't mean that any of it was their fault, and there's healing that can happen. What if you're not sure? What if you're not sure of any of this? Please feel free to call us, call the one line at any point, or to debrief. Sometimes we just need to say this stuff out loud. We've seen something, we've heard something, someone we care about has been hurt. Reach out. We've heard a lot of things, we've seen some things, and we know how helpful it is from personal experience to really just be able to share with somebody we trust, or to share anonymously, which can be a wonderful experience. Policies and practices in your organization do matter. And how you operate your school or organization does communicate to youth your openness around talking about tough stuff. So a lot of what we've talked about today is that personal relationship with youth, but how we operate as an organization also communicates to youth, what your values are, how you're going to respond, and impacts if or how they seek help when they need it. So we also have a session about organizational readiness to deal with this. And it's based on, and I really encourage you to go to the Harvard Making Caring Common website. They have sort of a series called The Talk. So they have an organizational audit that our work is based on, but they also have some really valuable resources just about how to dismantle some of the harmful beliefs, ideologies that may exist, and how to talk with kids. So come to our next session on this, or just go to Making Caring Common, or both. I hope none of you were scared that we were going to jump into an actual policy discussion. At this point, you're probably thinking, no thanks, it's a lot of information. But I suspect some of you might be very interested in that topic. And if you are ready to go a little bit deeper, because just as our conversations with kids aren't one and done, neither are these conversations. So sadly, a lunch and learn isn't going to give us everything we need to build skills and confidence. But it might generate ideas, it might generate motivation and optimism that none of us are in this alone. So these are some topics that we do have available for, further whatever, more of these, or I think most of them are built to be like 2 to 3 hours long if you really want to get into it. But just know that there's more to come if you want it. There's appetite. Another thing, I just have to do a shameless plug, because today is the last day to register for our first responders training, which is happening in 2 weeks here in Camrose, in person for the first time in 3 years, maybe more. But this is 11 more hours. So in summary, can you believe we got through all that material? I could have included more, stop it. Engaging with youth early and often equips them with information, skills, and support to traverse the online landscape early and often. Kids are more likely to come to us when they know we can handle the tough stuff. They know we can say the words, and we can do it without losing it. And we're mapping this out together. I don't know all the answers to this. This is why we're working in an interdisciplinary group. It's why we're calling on you to help us out, to work together to put a dent in whatever's happening for youth. So back to a poll. Let's do this poll again and see where you're at. See if I remember how to do this. Where are you at now? So we'll just take a couple minutes. Same questions as before. Can you see it? Yeah, okay. This is where I get to see how many people have fizzled out along the way. But we still have really good participation. I'm so happy. So great. Okay, I'm going to end poll here, and we can, in 3, 2, 1, share the results. Okay, so we have a good number who are confident in when and how to start conversations. Wait till we get out more information about that framework. I think that's going to be really helpful for people. Same with feeling you have a good grip on the risks and benefits. Although I think most of you had that before too. I think we're all kind of savvy in that area. And you all would reach out to somebody. Great. That's awesome. That's good. Sometimes we just need to know who's behind the scenes, and that's the really nice thing about these working groups that we have, is building that relationship within the community. And so if you're not from Camrose, I really encourage you to seek others in your community who have the same goals or the same concerns, and you never know what's going to come up. Okay, this is what we just did. Okay, help us help others. So many of you know that ACAA is a nonprofit, and we do report on all of this stuff. We also want to know how to make our programs better. So please, if you don't know how to use a QR code, this is how you access our survey. But basically just hold your phone, like open up your camera on your phone. And if everybody in the room, if you have multiple people in the room, everybody just hold it up to the screen, and you can see, you should be able to see a little yellow box around this funny square thing. And then you just click the whatever comes up, the words that come up for you. And then that's how you can access our survey. So if you could complete that, that would be amazing. And I thank you very much for that. I usually forget to put out the survey, so this is it. Today's the day. And I want you to know we are here for you at any point to debrief, to talk, to ask questions. We also would love your feedback. At ACAA, we're the Regional Sexual Assault Center for East Central Alberta. So we cover Toefield, Stettler, Camrose, Drum, Consort, Coronation, Hanna, Oyen. So it's a really big region. And we provide counseling for survivors of sexualized violence, from child sexual abuse to adult sexual assaults. We offer specialized police and court support, which means that before somebody even reports, they can come to us and ask questions. We can let them know what to expect. We can have their back, whether or not they decide to go through the process or not. If they do, we will attend interviews, advocate with law enforcement in the Crown, go to court. You know, it's a big system that most of us aren't very familiar with. So we're here for any survivor as they do that, if they do that. We offer system navigation and support, which basically just means, you know, trying to figure out how to get what you need, because we know that in order to heal from trauma, our baseline needs need to be adequately taken care of, or at least stable. If we're too worried about where to get food, having a bed to sleep on, you know, some family relationships are struggling, where to get our kids counseling, it's really hard to work on our own trauma healing. Education and training. This is, you've gotten a taste of it today. And coordination of services. We love working with other organizations. Nobody can do it alone. And speaking of which, in Camrose, we're so fortunate to have a team with diverse skills and perspectives to come up with ideas. around all of this stuff. We all have different contacts with different youth, different needs and experiences. And I think we're just so fortunate to have gotten together. And I really encourage any other community to do the same if there's an appetite for it. And so now we've been together for a little over an hour. You've heard me talking at you for quite some time, so I'd love to hear from you. So Tammy is going to facilitate a bit of a conversation, but if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have anything you'd like to offer, we do have a little over 20 minutes to talk as a group. And I want to thank you all. Thanks for hanging with me for an hour. I know that was kind of long, and I really look forward to your feedback.
Oh, Jenny. Oh, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. That was such a rich presentation, so much information that was shared. And, just before we go to some of the questions, I just wanted to mention how I really appreciated how you embedded throughout the presentation, that kids need connection, that they need belonging and acceptance. It's developmentally hardwired in them. And, I just couldn't help but thinking that we are those adults that they can be connected to. And we know that their resiliency and their ability to cope is improved or enhanced when we can be those caring adults in their lives. So thank you to everyone who came to the presentation today to hear that. I noticed that Shara has shared with us so many websites, or links to websites in the chat box. And Tracy shared a website to Teaching Sexual Health. And I'm thinking it might be helpful if maybe we have created a page with all of those links that we will send out to everyone. So if you're, madly trying to write those down from the chat box, we will send you that. And I will invite then maybe Andrea and Lori, maybe you can help me as we monitor the chat box. Carly, I see that your hand is up and I will come to you in a moment. And I noticed in the chat box, there was the question about, will the recording be shared? And Jenny, will you help remind me? We said that, yes, we would share the recording. Were we wanting people to email us for that? Or are we going to share that recording with everyone? Can you remind me what we did decide on, or did we?
I'm not sure that we got to that level of detail. I will say any of that is based on my ability to download the recording. So, but yes, how should we do that? Should we just, if we can easily send it, we can send it to everybody, and then you're welcome to delete it and never look at it again. Or if you feel that it needs to be shared with people in your community, by all means, please do.
Okay, thank you. All right. Maybe I'll open it up. I'm on my screen. I noticed that Carly has her hand up. And again, Andrea and Lori, I'll invite you to help me out too with the chat box. So Carly, would you like to go ahead and ask a question?
You betcha. Thank you so much, Jenny and Tam and Shara. I just found that so helpful and engaging. So thank you, ladies, for organizing this for us. And I had 2 super fast questions. Would one of you ladies be open or able to reshare that slide with all the images of the social media logos? Because I wanted to take a photo because there's lots that I was not familiar with. It was making me feel a little old. And the second question I had was, I feel this would be so valuable for, shifting slightly the delivery, but for students to receive the same information. I was just curious, especially for my junior high and high school students, if there was anything that ACAA shared directly in classrooms, or something that we could have passed on to us so we could deliver.
Yes, we have a program called the Connected You, and we address a lot of this in that for grades 7 to 12. So yeah, reach out to us and we can chat about that. And I'm going to try find that. I'll go back to that slide. So you'll see me flipping through it, but then you can take a screen share of all the apps.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies.
And I appreciate that comment too, Carly, because that helps our committee help us, I guess, develop some of our next steps. Where do we need to go next? What is it within our community? What is our community looking for? So that comment is really helpful. And any other comments from anyone else on the call today? What do they see maybe they're needing within their organization, within our community? Because as Jenny mentioned, it is a community, a collaborative approach in dealing with this, not just one agency alone. And there's that slide again. Good. Okay, I'm going to look and see, are there any other hands up? Andrea, were there any questions in the chat box that I may have missed?
I don't see any, Tammy, no.
Okay.
I do see a comment though about folks outside of our region maybe being able to benefit from this, and I think that that's certainly something we're always happy to share our resources and with anybody that might find it helpful.
Right. Lots of comments in the chat box, Jenny, thanking you for all of this rich information. Else? Any questions, any comments?
Jenny, also wondering if maybe you could just leave the QR code up for the survey at the end for people who are still fiddling with devices. That might be helpful because the feedback is so essential for next steps and yeah. Perfect.
And the question about your aha moment, what is a gem that you've taken away or your aha moment? Shara, were we going to invite people to put that in the chat box, or did you have, are we Zoom booming or?
I think if people want to put that in the chat box, that's wonderful. It'd be great to hear what the aha moments are. Sometimes other people's aha moments flag your own aha moments. So that might be a really nice way to bring a closure to the conversation today, or use the last of our time.
I'm going to say mine out loud because, when Jenny, when you said it's not about the internet and our knowledge about the internet and how do we use the internet and all that we know, but just our ability to be non-judgmental and to be open, and our ability to engage with kids so that they can come forward in times of trouble. And I think you just reminded us of that over and over again today. It's always helpful to get more information, but it's reminding ourselves as who we are, that caring adult in a young person's life, so they will feel comfortable coming forward. And there's many supports and communities to help once someone has disclosed something. Jen Willis, you had the same aha moment. Yeah. Non-judgmental. But there's a website to get the photos down. I didn't realize either that it was legal for two intimate partners to consensually share pictures. That was legal. Yeah, that for underage. Yeah. Never too early or too late to be having these conversations about relationship. Well, as your aha moments maybe keep coming in, I'll just ask one more time if there was any other questions for Jenny, anyone else on the committee. Really do appreciate you taking your lunch hour to spend with us and to listen to Jenny today. And hopefully some of the content you heard today can help guide your next steps. And that's great hearing some of these things coming in. So, Jenny, did you have any closing comments? Any last things you wanted to say?
Just thank you. Thank you for spending your noon hour with us. There's so much to talk about and dive into around this issue. And I think it takes some time. It takes some time to to kind of comb through the issues and figure out how to address them. If anyone has any ideas, we're game. Right now, I think we're really in the preliminary stages of working together to address the concerns and help kids feel really safe. And I'm just so grateful that all of you are in the same boat, that you're also looking for the same thing and willing to spend more than an hour over your lunch hour to have these conversations. Question, what is the most current game or most current app that youth are using? You know who I think might be able to answer this? I don't know, school-based folks, youth organization folks. What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, for us here, a lot of it's Snapchat. That's where
Snap.
we see a lot of our concerns.
But it totally depends on the students you're dealing with. So if you've got really heavy gamers, they're communicating with like gaming apps like Discord and Twitch.
Mhm.
It's really tricky. That's why it is kind of important to know what those the ones on that slide are, because some of those are chat links for gamers, right?
I wanted to share with you, it's actually an Instagram account I follow called The Gamer Educator, and they provide really incredible resources on gaming, and it's pro gaming. In fact, it's lessened my anxiety around my own kids gaming, and but that's something that I have found very helpful. And but yeah, I agree, the Twitch, Snap, TikTok. Anime role playing. Do you feel comfortable sharing more about anime role playing?
Yes. So it's not called that. There's another name for it. It's just not coming to mind right now. But I know
it's not furries.
Maybe one of them, because I know that there's like a couple of them, the cosplay, but there are different, I guess, different apps you can get where it's strictly for people that are into anime and cosplay and role play. And so they will literally just act out whatever scene that they want, right? I often find that this can turn into something very negative, especially like, where is your mindset at and what are you role playing, right? I've had where I've read some and, nothing inappropriate is going on, thank goodness, but I'm always leery of it because you don't know who's on the other end of it, right? And you don't know how, like, it can seem innocent at first until they get comfortable, and then next thing you know, it's going in a very inappropriate direction.
And I mean, that is the tricky, feels like a really low level word for this, but the tricky thing about grooming, like grooming is a very powerful way to get people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. And I do think it's worth maybe having another lunch and learn specifically about how grooming works, helping us to understand it, and that it's not about teaching kids about what's the word I'm looking for, like weird or tricky people. It's more about at what point is it a tricky situation or encounter, because I don't remember, did we share the Stranger Danger 2.0 website?
I think it's on now. Yeah, I can now.
Okay, it talks a little bit about how, like, I find the stranger danger stuff really challenging to talk about online, and it's something that I'm still wrapping my head around, because in the world of sexual violence, we don't talk about stranger danger with kids. For years we've been saying it's people you know who hurt you. Online is a completely different situation where everyone's a stranger and no one's a stranger. It's such a complicated way of thinking about how we interact with others. So anyways, it's a whole other thing, but you bring up some really, really important points.
our friends at the FFCS were just kind of commenting on how there's always seems to be a new app that kids are looking into, and that sometimes it's those apps really that seem to be the ones that are kind of creating the trouble sometimes, because adults haven't familiarized themselves yet with it.
I like that last comment that somebody had wrote there about the use of the term friend used by social media platforms. And that's a really good awareness that that's what kids are hearing. I'm your Facebook friend, I'm your Instagram friend. So it's good to have conversations around that too. And one other thing I wanted to bring up that our group identified last time we met was the need to train the youth themselves so that they can be helpers for each other, right? Because a lot of times they're going to their friends for help. So we recognize that need and want to move in a direction that can support that also.
So not just adults as allies, but youth as allies as well. Thank you for those comments, Lori. I see Stephanie has her hand up. Stephanie. And you're muted, Stephanie.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm just working from home today, so I'm looking a little casual. But I just wanted to respond to the Flagstaff comment about, not being familiar with all of these apps. And Common Sense Media is a great website that allows you to search even movies or video games and get really good information about what that app or game or resource is all about, and also any risks, or there's rankings available. So I know as a parent, I found that a really good resource when my kiddos were younger, just to almost educate myself before I had a conversation with them. So I felt like I had a grip on what that was.
Thank you, Stephanie. I just find when we're all sharing like this, we just, we learn from one another, don't we? And it's great.
I also wanted to just remind everybody to be gentle with themselves in terms of learning all of these new things, and feeling just maybe a little overwhelmed by the idea of having to keep up with all the different apps and platforms. And when we're thinking about it, we're not just thinking about we're thinking about gaming consoles. They're not just for games now. There's lots of different ways that kids can interact with the world and the internet through the game consoles. Thinking about phones and iPads and tablets and things like that. And we're also thinking about computers, and each of these each of these pieces of their tools, and each of these tools have different pieces that we need to familiarize ourselves with. And so I just wanted to say, be gentle with yourselves and be curious and be interested, because I think it's that curiosity that's going to be so helpful. We're showing interest in our kids ultimately, and that's really the most important thing. Our students, the people that we're working with, and try not to get bogged down by feeling a sense of overwhelm, because I think sometimes we do. And so I just wanted to say, try and be gentle with yourself.
Thank you, Andrea. That's a great comment. Becky, is your hand up, or is that from before?
Yeah, but Bob's trying to feed me pizza. I think he's trying to butter me up. I just want to say, I think that as a parent of kids this age, as well as working in the school, when we think about all the apps and the games and the speed with which they come out, one of the things that took me a while to land on is actually we don't need to keep on top of the apps. We need to go back to what is the purpose and what are the things running behind it. So talking about the grooming and understanding that, and having conversations with our kids about how people manipulate you like that. I know that I always show my grade 7s The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which talks about the algorithms that run behind the apps and how they can watch your patterns to make it addicted. And that's how they program artificial intelligence. It's really complicated. But when you understand that no matter what the app is, this is the manipulation tool they're going to use, I think it's a little bit easier, because I was the mom who tried to, every time my kid got a new app, get the parent control app that went with it. And I actually can't keep up, right? And so it's going back to like, what are the fundamental things behind this?
And Becky, Tracy is asking, what was that video you showed grade 7s?
It's called The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix, and it's a docudrama that talks about technology, and it's by several people that worked for Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and talks about how it was set up with good intentions, but then when money's involved, how much control they actually have over what they're showing. And what's really valuable, I say to students, how many of you have ever talked about something and then all of a sudden you talked about Nike shoes, and then all of a sudden your ads are all Nike shoes? It's because your phone actually does listen. And so we talk about it, and there's really online, there's a great parent discussion guide and student discussion guide. So I always send that home before I watch it with the kids, because some of it's complicated, but the documentary part's a little confusing, but the drama part actually shows kind of what happens as the kids get sucked in to that. And so like, because it was, as a teacher and an administrator who deals with extortion cases and situations all the time, it was like, how do we get kids to like critically think? That's what we need. And I was, like I said, I was the mom trying to control every parent control app there was, and reality is we're not gonna be able to keep up. So, yeah.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, very helpful. Yeah. All right. Well, I see it's almost 1:30. If there are no other comments or questions, I'd really like to thank all of you for spending this last hour and a half with us. It was very informative. We have some information that can help guide our next steps. And any other communities out there, I wish you well in collaborating within your community for how your community can respond to youth and families and professionals. Please do reach out to any of us if you have any other questions. And again, we'll send out a handout with all of those links for you, probably within a couple of days or so. So might you all have just a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for joining all of us, and do take good care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, ladies. See you.